Hey, thank you all so much for joining another episode of Celeste, the Therapist Podcast. My name is Celeste. I'm a therapist from Boston. Uh, if this is your first time in here, thank you for being here. What we do on here is we talk to people who are doing things to empower other people. But once a month, Jermaine and I'm going to have him introduce himself to you all. We come together and we talk about different things that come up in life because life be life for everyone. And how to get your mind right. And, with anything that you do in life or here in life, you take what you can. And so, I really want people, I have regular people who listen to Jermaine and I all the time, always know that it's not about us telling you what to do, but just kind of like talking about like how you can possibly do some things because what works for me may not work for Jermaine and vice versa. So I'm gonna have for new people, I'm gonna have Jermaine introduce himself to you all.
Hi, I'm Jermaine Morris. I'm a certified coach and consultant with a practice based around a DISC assessment, which is basically just a test that shows how individuals deal with problems, decision making, communication. In the test comes a full page report showing our most and least effective ways to communicate, potential blind spots in behavior. All of it kind of designed for people who decide they want to make a change or do something different. It's a really good starting point, and it provides a lot of great information because my focus is self-awareness without judgment. So getting a clear understanding of how we are without looking through the lens of good, bad, right, wrong, just kind of deciding how we do things and if we want to do things differently.
Thank you for sharing that. One of the things you said in your introduction is that helping people kind of see the blind spots, because somebody may think like, how are there blind spots when it's me? Like I know what I like, I know what I don't like. What does that mean when you talk about helping people see the blind spots? What does that look like?
Yeah, so sometimes there's things that we do that we're not aware we do them or as frequently as we do them.
Hmm.
So they're just as if you're driving on a car and there's a certain area that you can kind of see a little bit or you have a degree of an understanding, but maybe not as clear as others see about you. And
Hmm.
so maybe blind spots in behavior can be how we come across.
Yes.
We think that, oh no, I'm just direct, I'm straight shooter, but to everyone else, they're using different adjectives. You
Hmm.
know, we may feel like, oh no, we can rationalize all the things that we do because it makes sense to us. But
Hmm.
when you can take the step back and see, okay, maybe that's not exactly what it is. Because when you can look at something without the emotion attached to it, that's
Hmm.
usually where you find where the blind spots lie.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
so yeah, things like procrastination and communication styles and all that stuff, we can justify them because we have a feeling attached to them.
Yeah.
But being able to look at them objectively, the behavior objectively helps us see where those blind spots are.
And that's so hard.
Yeah.
And the mind's gonna like go with the direction you go. So it's easy for the mind to find ways to confirm what
Mhm.
you think is true, which may not be completely true. And even I'm really great at what I do. I'm great at helping people see things, but there's been many times that I've had blind spots in situations where an outside person helps me see it. And I'm like, oh, but you got to be willing to be open to understanding because the ego will struggle with Jermaine telling me like, hey, Celeste, like you were a little bit abrupt with me today or aggressive, whatever, right? And I'm like,
Right.
that's not who I am, but maybe I was rushing and I didn't see it, right? So in order for people to be able to see their blind spots, they would have to be open to understanding, right?
Yeah, and so the big starting point, like say if I work with somebody, is at some point you decided that whatever the current way you've been doing it is no longer working for you. So it doesn't mean that everything's falling apart and everything's wrong, but at some point there's something I want to do differently. So there's a degree of openness has to be there to accept it. And what I like about the assessment is that it's just objective information. So it's not my opinion. It's not, so it's not those things where, well, I feel you're such. No, it's actual data that is your, how an individual behaves. But when it comes time to being able to accept those types of things, you have to be, there has to be an openness, a willingness to say like, okay, I feel like I know myself, but there's always room to learn. There's always a space to maybe learn a few new things about myself. And in that space is where you'll see that growth start to happen.
Yeah, that makes sense. And even as a therapist, and as I talk to people, and I hear about their upbringing and maybe their mom or dad, and some of the ways that they were like, right, and then maybe months down the road, they're doing something that's eerily similar to what they say they hated. And when I point it out, it's like obviously that when they choose to come to therapy, they're open to understanding and hearing my perspective. And when I point it out, it's kind of like, oh snap, like I didn't even realize that. You're absolutely right. Right. And so it's interesting in how we can tune out some parts, and try to make some parts work that may not be working for us, but it's all we know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the joys of the brain, it looks for the answers to the questions that we ask it. So if we've
Hmm.
already decided this is what I think, this is what I feel, this is what I
Hmm.
believe, it's just going to look
Hmm.
for things to confirm that.
Exactly.
But when we get in that space of saying, okay, maybe there's another way to look at it, then it
Hmm.
will start to find other ways to look at it too.
Literally with my story, I decided I was choosing, like, I didn't like the way my life was going. And I always tell people, continue to ask questions like, what is this about? What's going on? Like Jermaine said, the brain's going to try to find ways to answer it. If we're not questioning it, we're just going to keep going down that line, which can be really hard.
Yeah, children are the
Yeah.
best at that. That's
Yeah.
the immortal question of why is their
Yeah.
brain trying to formulate those neural pathways and try to connect dots and create new dots to connect. It's like, well, why?
I know.
Well, how
I
come?
know. So one of the things, that because me and Jermaine come on monthly, I like for him to like talk about things that are going on or that he's seeing. And one of the things he talked about is kind of like trauma blocking, or how we tend to avoid things that we um, we sh- I don't want to say we should deal with, because it's all in people's timing, but things that may be affecting our growth. Tell me a little bit about like what you've seen, and what your thoughts are about like the trauma blocking that you find yourself seeing people do.
It's I've been seeing it more frequently lately, and some people equate it to seasonal affected depression. Some people see it show up because of the holidays. I think all this stuff is a combination, but trauma blocking in itself is simply as put, it's the practice of numbing or avoiding certain emotions.
Hmm.
So we just try to find things to busy ourselves, and there's different kind of behaviors that kind of show up with that. So
Hmm.
if you see somebody who compulsively online shopping for stuff you don't need, stuff that you're
Hmm.
never going to use, you got your third toaster and nobody in the house eats toast. Like you're just
Hmm.
buying stuff to occupy time, the thrill of the hunting down, the shopping, and the buying. People who work excessively. So that's kind of the issue sometimes, is because you get rewarded. So if you, instead of dealing with certain things, you just decide, I'm just going to work. I'm just going to stay at work. I'm not going to deal with these things and I'm just going to keep working. Well, you may have a financial return, so you can kind of justify why that's a successful method. Or even going to the gym. Those people who compulsively go, I'm going to go 4 hours a day, 6 days a week, and just kill it and burn my battery out, so I don't have the mental or emotional space left to have to deal with the things that I was dealing with. But in return, I have a phenomenal physique, or I'm incredibly fit. So I'm being rewarded for the avoidance of the issues. And those are temporary things. And what happens is, at times when you run out of rope, that's where you can start seeing some detrimental effects.
And I do want to point out, as Jermaine's talking about these things, and I'm glad, because we can easily say alcohol or drugs, because that's something that is easily, well, not always easily, but, people identify that quicker than working out or working.
Yeah,
And one of the things society, our culture does is reward people for working really hard. You get the extra bonus on your checks, you get the status, growth rate, the working out. So sometimes, I think these are some areas, or shopping. Um, people miss these parts and don't even realize. And I've had a lot of conversations with people lately around like shopping, right? They're complaining about finances, but they're buying things they don't need, and not making the connection or not even realizing like that's an addiction that they're developing. And a lot of times it's to avoid a feeling. Do you think it's, when we say like people are like trauma blocking or avoiding this stuff, do you think people consciously are aware that they're doing this in the moment?
In the moment, maybe not, but sometimes you'll hear some. I can't think about this. I can't deal with this right now, and they put something in its place. And at some point, usually there's kind of a discussion, an internal discussion, maybe. Other times, you did something and you felt a positive return. So right along with like drugs and alcohol, there's excessive eating. Just for some reason, something happened. You were feeling depressed. You were feeling sad, and that macaroni and cheese just tasted a lot better today. Just those cookies today, just what was something about them. They were just warm to the right temperature. Like them cookies felt like a hug for some reason. And then like we were talking about before, about how the brain recognizes, oh, this thing made me feel better. So doing this thing makes me feel better. So whenever this stuff starts to come up, I'm going to do the thing that made me feel better. And so drinking made me feel better because it may not have been the bonus of benefit, but it was the reduction of pain. So that numbing. Go ahead.
And it's an external reward, right? Trying to fulfill internal things with external gratification is always going to be temporary. Trying to do it intrinsically or internally is a lot harder to do, especially when we've never seen it. We grow up in environments where we watch people eat or shop or work a lot, work really hard, become CEOs. There's a book that I'm reading, but the doctor was his name is Dr. Gabor Mate, and he was a really great physician. He did really well, came from a lot of trauma, but he said at home his wife and kids suffered, but he was world renowned and was doing all of these great things. But at home his life looked differently. It was a huge disconnect. And I think that could be one of the markers for people that may not even be able to identify some of the areas that they're struggling. And it's like, there shouldn't be an imbalance. Like a lot of people are growing, they'll grow professionally, but mentally they're struggling. Right. And that's typical of our culture. When we meet people, we say like, what do you do for a living? Right. A lot of the value that we place on us is what we do or how much money we make or what we have. Right. And then so like we fall in line with that same mentality and we don't even realize that we're doing it.
Yeah. And this society kind of stems to two directions. So one, it supports, cheers on, respects the grinder mentality, the hustler mentality, where you just like, man, I'm working 90 hours a week, or I'm working out 6 days a week, or I'm just like, oh man, and you're praised for it. That rise and grind, get up and just, burn the candle at both ends. Oh, you're going out and getting it. You're out there, and you're getting rewarded in that way for that. And then the other side is that it's the fear, shame, and guilt mechanism to when you're going through things. So you isolate. So either you're being rewarded for a behavior that may be wearing you down and it's just breaking your body down. It's disconnecting from your family. It's all these things. You're getting rewarded on one end, or you get shamed for the experience that you went through on the other. So you remove yourself and you isolate and then go into those excessive behaviors that do not give those external tangible rewards. So you'll go and drink by yourself at home. You'll excessively eat at home. You'll online shop at home because the shame attached to it, you don't want to be in the public. And then the stuff we do in the public is rewarded, even though the behavior may ultimately become problematic.
Oh yeah, that's such a good point. And I think that people that are listening to this, remember at the beginning, Jermaine said like awareness without judgment, right?
Yes.
Because there's been times I've talked to people, there's things that they haven't They're like, "Oh, I don't know. I don't want to talk about it." I'm like, "You don't have to bring it up here. It's not about," I said, "I want you to be aware of what's happening. I don't need
Yeah.
to know." Right. And so like if anything is like sounding like it's resonating, it's not about judging yourself because I had a therapist on last week, episode 389, where she discussed the things that we have done to survive and get through moments, right? Because it's like living in pain, kind of like when you're in shock and the doctor gives you something to like give you a coma because there's too much pain to deal with in the
Yeah.
moment,
Yeah.
right? It's the same thing that we kind of learn how to do to deal with hard moments. So like I really want people to have a lot of grace with themselves as the awareness starts to come into play when they realize, dang, I am doing the stuff behind closed doors and there is a lot of guilt. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Like the whole like not judging yourself as you're thinking about
Yeah,
this?
that's key because, like I said, normally what happens when we go into that coping mechanism, it's because we did something accidentally, or maybe we were introduced to it, where in
Mhm,
the moment it seemed like a win.
mhm.
Like, I've been down, I've been out, I've been this, I've been that, and buying something, I felt better because I got something new.
Yeah, yeah.
I was down, I was out, I just want a large pizza with a 2-liter soda and put my feet up on this couch. And
Mhm.
the first day we did it, we felt better.
Yeah,
There
yeah,
was something that happened that them shots, it's party, it's 5 o'clock somewhere that
yeah,
first time. And then we just started doing it and it became a habit.
yeah.
And so it's understanding, showing that grace. And it's not a question of judging ourselves. It's just looking at like, I understand why I started. And now I may be having difficulties getting out of it, but at least I know, like, I get it. I equate that to people who, kids, everybody used to fall out of a tree or crash their bike or whatever. And you probably should have went to the doctor. But if you were born in the 70s, the 80s, or early 90s, you didn't.
I heard the stories. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so, you may have kind of like a little hitch to your walk.
Mhm.
Or a bone might have been fractured and it didn't heal all the way because you didn't keep the cast on or get a cast on it.
Yeah.
So, but you kind of adjusted your walk to that kind of hitch. You
Mhm.
got that knee problem that you didn't get surgery for. You kind of adjusted your stance for that knee. And now you may be years removed and you just are accustomed to the way you walk.
Mhm.
Acknowledging that you have the hitch in your walk, it's not a judgment. It's, I
Mhm.
understand why it's there. It was a decision that was made who knows how long ago. And I just kind of learned to adjust with that. You're not wrong for then wanting to revisit it and get your leg fixed.
Yeah, that's good. That's
You
good.
know?
And for people that live in cold weather places, the winter's hitting. Also, even if you don't live in cold weather places, holidays are here, and so for some people, you may find some of these behaviors feel it feels you may not realize it, but maybe as you're thinking, it's like, oh, I've increased it, right?
No.
Kind of paying attention to this time frame because this is when I'm more busier with clients, more people come back because the sun's not out, we're not moving as much. There's a lot of reminders about things. And so, again, thinking about how do I deal with this without judging myself
Yeah.
and understanding the triggers that are coming up for me, especially with the holidays. A lot of times it equates to family. And a lot of people have a lot of family trauma or loss that may be triggered from this time. And when this stuff happens and the pain is there, when you don't deal with the pain, unfortunately, it feels it continues to feel bigger than what it is, right?
Yeah.
Like if you have a wound that you haven't dealt with, it could get worse before it gets better. And so if you continue to ignore something, what tends to happen is that when another emotion that is eerily similar to that emotion comes up, it feels like you're back to that time,
Yeah.
right? That's why I talk about like being aware of it, because it's not like we can avoid feeling triggered, but we can avoid making impulsive decisions off of that
Yes.
feeling. Tell me if that makes sense.
Very much so. And I think where these holidays highlights things. So when we talked at the very beginning, talk about blind spots. And so sometimes in those blind spots, it's not the billboard, it's the street sign. So holidays, a lot of things are closed. like gyms are closed or your job is on hiatus or all these sorts of things like this. You work less. So if you were pouring these feelings and emotions into work, and now you have all these days off.
Yeah.
You don't it may not be the realization might not be why I feel this anxiety or I feel these things coming on. It's because the thing that you chose to pour into to avoid the pain are no longer there. So the people who you poured into have gone away to see their families or have families visiting, so they're no longer accessible. The things that you were involved with and participated in are not accessible to you. Something like Indiana Jones, where he was trying to outrun that big boulder. Well, you've had enough activities and people to stay ahead of the boulder. Well, now you work less. Your friends and social circles are less accessible. The things you used to do are not present because the weather's got you inside more if you're in the cold weather states. The people who you hung out with are no longer accessible because they're either visiting someone else or someone is visiting them. Work is not there. You got all these days off that keep coming back to back. The boulder is now catching you. And so that's when people start getting hit. And it's like, oh, it's not, I don't care. It's not, maybe it's not Thanksgiving, quote unquote. It's not Christmas, quote unquote. It's the it's the circumstances surrounding Thanksgiving and Christmas that are starting to, those are the blind spots. It's not the billboard, it's the street sign. It's the little things that are starting to, that we're missing, you know, because we're looking, because it's not always a big blaring thing. It's like, does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, totally. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So for people who are starting to, you know, now it's starting to catch them. Like, oh, I would have just went outside running. Well, it's 3 feet of snow outside. That's not about to happen.
Right.
You know, I would have just worked extra hours. Everybody's working half days. We trying to get out of here. Just like we're, you know, I would go hang out at the club. Ain't no club going on when it's 10 degrees outside. Like it's just, you know, and then when you have to sit with yourself, that's when you revisit the original reason why you developed the coping mechanisms in the first place.
Right. And a lot of people remember this feeling from when we entered the pandemic, right?
Exactly.
A lot of people, there were people that had a lot of healthy coping mechanisms that they were using. They may have been going to yoga studios or doing certain healthy things that was snatched away, and they had to rethink what like health looked like for them, right? So you know, what the things you're as you was talking, I was thinking this is literally what happened when the pandemic started for a lot of people, whether they was using healthy or unhealthy coping mechanisms. It was all stripped away from them like overnight, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so when you in those and depression and domestic violence and alcoholism and all that stuff skyrocketed during the pandemic. And so when we don't deal with the issue at hand, and we're not aware maybe that we just go through the motions, because I think sometimes there's this narrative that I'm depressed, I'm going to drink, or I have anxiety, I'm going to eat, I have this, I'm going to shop. A lot of times it's not an A to B connection. It's more like a series of dominoes. One domino hits here, but it's the 50th domino that falls down that you notice. So it's a series of events that were in place, interactions, conversations, things that you notice. And now all of a sudden we're like, well, I'm looking at domino 50 and I'm looking at domino 49. I don't understand how 49 hit 50. Yeah, because it was pushed by 1.
Yeah.
And, you know, and it was 1 through 48 that got 50 on the floor.
Right.
You know, and so just being the awareness part, like, what are some of the things I'm doing? Why am I doing them? If I stop doing them, would I still be okay? Like checks and balances. You know, can I stop? Can I go 30 days without drinking? I don't think I have a problem. Just can I do it? Can I lay off sweets for 4 weeks? Can I not do this? And if I can't, like if by day 3 I'm caving, do I start making rationalizations, justification? Like these are things that start to highlight, like, oh, maybe the things I'm doing aren't as recreational as I think they are.
Right. They could have started off recreationally and eventually became like your only strategy of dealing with things, which is not healthy at all.
And those other things weed out. So you're too far. If you chose drinking, because that's one of the things that's most successful universally, you may have only been drinking once a month when you had a problem before. So it wasn't a big deal. It moved to twice a month. move to 3 times a month. Now, if you're drinking 4 times a month, just in a 30-day time period, that now changes maybe how active you are going to coffee with friends during the next day. So you don't do that anymore. Mm-hmm. If you're drinking 5 or 6 times a month, you used to go jogging regularly, but that doesn't happen as much because you're drinking more regularly. So the positive things that you had that were going on before, along with you can find yourself doing those less.
Yeah.
So not only are you removing the positive ways to deal with stuff, once those are removed, then you increase the other ones that are maybe more problematic. So it went from this was just one of the things I did to now it becomes the only thing that I do.
Right. And, one of the things that, I always want to not just talk about the issue, but I want to talk about ways to deal with them. And as we're thinking about like behavior and changing, grace is one, but thinking about harm reduction, like how do I decrease it? One of the things that is helpful is grabbing yourself a motion wheel. I tell people to think about how they are feeling in the moment of like before they get off of work and they find themselves drinking a lot. Check in with what you're feeling. Try if you could sit with it for a little bit, or ask yourself, what do you need? And if you end up deciding to do that activity that you do, okay, but at least you're more self-aware of acknowledging what's happening as opposed to just like automatically doing it. I think that can be a helpful thing. And even if you can't identify a feeling, pay attention to what your body's doing. Sometimes our body responds to the things that we're struggling with before we have language for it, before we can articulate it. Maybe your stomach. A lot of people have a lot of gut issues, back issues, migraines. A lot of times I'm helping people make those connections. Like there'll be an issue. I'm like, oh, it sounds like the migraine started around this and then it ended. It was like, oh my gosh, you're so right. And now that you said it, I'm realizing like the migraines do come with this. So my stomach does turn when there's, and I've been seeing I've been seeing a doctor about this stomach stuff when it's probably just the anxiety from dealing with whatever, right? So my first thing I would think about doing is naming what you're feeling, paying attention to how you're feeling when you are doing that activity, whether it's shopping, drinking, overworking, saying yes to those extra shifts, knowing that you haven't slept in 2 days, right? Like that would be like my first thing. What would be some of the things that you would talk to people about doing as they're trying to like change up their behavior?
The ones you named were great to start with, and identifying the feeling where you're at. I love those emotion wheels. To be able to identify, okay, I feel this. This begets that. This feeling begets this behavior. And even if, like I said, even if you're not in a position to stop the behavior right now, at least changing the association of I deal with stress with food. I deal with anxiety with work. I deal with depression with working out. At least there's the identification of the emotion to the behavior. Ways to kind of deal with it. So good coping skills, good ways of dealing with stuff. Like after you get to the point to identify it, one of the things you brought up is big is in the body. So there's a comment says our cells eavesdrop on all of our thoughts. So all the cells in your body, they're listening to all the subconscious thoughts, all the narratives on repeat, all the things that we experience and talk. The entire body is listening. So a lot of pain, trauma, shame, anxiety is stored in different parts of the body. One of the most common ones you hear all the time, and man, he's a pain in my neck. These kids are a pain in my neck. Because there's actual tension that is stored in certain parts of the neck directly associated to certain levels of stress and tension. They're literally a pain in your neck. And there's other emotional and trauma-based emotions that are stored in different parts of the body. So like yoga is a really good method. And then some people may be like, not really all that flexible, but what it's good is about stretching out and getting in tune with the body. Where are these particular areas at where it seems to be stored at a little bit more?
Being able to that note, to Jermaine's point, I grew up with a lot of back issues, and it wasn't until I became an adult I realized when I'm under a lot of pressure, I feel like there's a boulder on my back, like there's something heavy, right? But as a child, I wasn't able to I wasn't making no connections like that, nor was I taught that. And so for some people, you may notice it in one area more than others. And it's not, it everybody's different. The way the trauma or the pain responds or where it gets stored, it just looks different. I don't know why it ended up in my back, but that's what happened. And then to your point about yoga, yoga was the first practice I tried where it allowed me to get in tune with my body.
Yeah.
I mean, I might have just been trying to try something. I don't remember it being said explicitly to me. And I started on YouTube at home before I even stepped into
Yeah.
a studio. And that was free. You know, I just want to like name that because I think we have like whitewashed a lot of like things where people feel like they don't have access to. And so I want people to know like there are free YouTube um, sessions, and that's literally where I started. And I started to like pay attention and get like I remember I would wash my hands and feel my hands. I would before I was never like in tune. It
Yeah.
really helped me learn how to breathe better and get more in touch with it. I was that person. I was like yoga or running. Like I was that person. So now it's like I swear by it. So I just wanted to kind of validate your point about those two things.
Yeah, and that is important too because a lot of times we associate certain things to certain cultures, or we associate them. Oh, that's what they do. We don't do that. That's their,
I
and we
was notorious for that.
yeah, and like with yoga specifically, yes, you can start in your living room. They go all the way from day one beginner to advanced pretzel twisting Cirque du Soleil. Like you can find all that on YouTube. And the big part of it is it teaches about breathing, becoming aware of the body's position to itself. Where are these things starting to where is this building up at? Where's
And I want to
okay.
say something about the breathing too. Sorry, because I spoke to a cigarette smoker or somebody who used to smoke cigarettes, and they was saying how, like when we was talking, it was like, you know what? Now that I think about it, I was probably smoking because I needed to breathe, and it was like helping them. It was the act of doing that and breathing in. You know, there. So the breathing part when it comes to yoga is like, um, well, the breathing part in general is amazing. You can
Yeah.
reset a lot with breathing. Like
Yeah,
that's
it's actually
huge.
bigger than the stretching part.
It's bigger than the stretching part. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I just wanted to validate that part because you're talking my language. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's good. So, oxygenate, oxygenate. Oh, I'm killing it. It's the practice of putting more oxygen in the body. I can't get the word out. But the practice of when you breathe in deeply and being mindful and intentional about where you want the oxygen you intake to push the blood to a particular area. When you get in the habit of doing it, it works with immune system, it works with healing, it works with trauma to the body. You can actually direct with your brain and your breathing more so where you want the blood to go to help repair parts of the body. Like it get deep when it comes to breathing. Just that little sidebar to yoga, but wherever you are, starting where you are with what you have, if you start to if an individual is realizing like maybe I have some of these things, or or you were very well aware and you're like I finally in a position where maybe I want to do something differently about it. Just things like the emotion wheel is great. I said yoga was good for identifying stuff in the body. Meditation, it kind of goes along with that, being able to train to sit in our thoughts without judgment, to be able to sit in those feelings that we normally need to want to mask or run from. Can I just sit in this experience and just experience it for what it is without labeling it as a good or bad experience? Like, because this experience, whatever this was, painful or harmful or whatever, at some point is now ingrained. It's in a list of ingredients on the side of the box that is making up my behavior. So I just need to look at it. And can I just see it and be able to mindfully sit in it without having to run from it or mask it with something else? Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense. And we're as we've kind of shared some ways to work through it. And the reason why I want people to be clear that it's only so much our mind and body can take, right? I say we play Russian roulette a lot with the way that we treat our body, the way we treat our mind. A lot of the ways that we may have been able to cope as children, the more responsibilities we have, the more pressures as adults, it gets harder to do the same things. Maybe disassociation was one, and now disassociation is messing up the relationship you have with your partner or your
Yeah.
kids or work. You're not being able to keep a job, and I think that we don't know the extent of where our mind can go and when it gets into a negative space, because we may have never seen ourselves there, right? Just same
Yeah.
way somebody who I see struggling with substance use and I talk about it, because they're not on the corner strung out, don't think they have an issue, right?
Yeah.
And so when it comes to the mind and the way that we are treating our struggles or avoiding it, just know you can't avoid parts of you, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not possible. I always tell people it's the audacity that we think that we can outsmart who we like are, what we've
Yeah.
experienced. Can't, contrary to popular belief, you may be like, oh, my mom was a strong person. It's like, but then when we start breaking down some of the things that has gone on in their life, they realize like they were struggling, right?
Yeah.
On the surface, it looked fine, but like it wasn't fine. So I really want people to think about, how do I identify what I'm dealing with? How do I use what I have and start where I am?
Yeah.
Because I realize like finances is like hard, and a lot of the things that may be easier to utilize to do is not accessible. But YouTube, even when Jermaine just talked about meditation, they have meditation on YouTube,
Yeah.
right? So and they have free groups, free support groups, and so like I really want people to get more solution oriented when the problem comes and not get stuck in what they don't have.
Yes, and two things that I've personally found, and especially if your economic situation is a factor. One is journaling, which I think is amazing for
Yes.
everything, of
Yeah.
getting these thoughts out of our head and putting them on paper, and it
Mhm.
changes the dynamic of the way our brain processes it,
Mhm.
from just being kind of jumbled up in our brain, attached to feelings and memories and emotions. And then when we put it
Mhm.
on paper and it's something tangible in the world, and then we read it
Mhm.
back, we're taking it in in a completely different door that it
Absolutely.
came out of.
100%.
And then, like you're saying, with the groups, reaching out,
Mhm.
like I said, one half of one group is delving in behaviors to try to mask and run from things. The other half is delving in isolation.
Mhm. Mhm.
They're just like, let me just, like I said, the shame attached to it,
Mhm.
guilt of feeling like I'm bothering somebody,
Right,
fear of
right.
being judged or ridiculed for what they think that, like, I quote unquote should not be feeling this or
Right,
shouldn't be
right.
going through this.
Yeah.
And so we isolate. So reaching out and finding your tribe, finding,
Mhm.
fellowship and other
Mhm.
people who you can talk with. And it may not be a formal therapist.
Right.
Like, it just may be just some people that you can hear it's not just you.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then you can learn other ways that other people have started to deal with
Mhm.
stuff and
It's
learn stuff.
powerful.
Yeah, big difference. It makes a huge
Yeah.
difference. You know.
Yeah. This was good. I think that especially around this time, I think regardless of when people are listening to this, I think that
It still
it's
holds up.
helpful. Yeah, it still holds up. And my goal is always to give people hope. That's why I started this podcast, is because um I've been in a place that was not where I'm at. And I never thought being here was possible. But it is possible. And so my goal is to keep like sharing this information with other people. And so I'm grateful that you come on and help me share this message with other people, because it really makes a huge difference. Podcasts are one, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so really think outside the box. Don't, I think America really creates a way where we feel like if we don't have certain things that it's not possible to heal. And that's just not true. Like I never want you to allow that to be your story. So
Yeah. And for anybody who's having that space, the centuries and centuries of healing techniques and coping skills predate the consumer-based association to the things
yeah,
we think we can't afford.
great point. Great point.
So all the meditations and the yoga and the breathing and the learning mindfulness and the communication and the talk therapy and all that stuff is centuries predates being able to afford something.
Hmm.
So please don't think that healing is attached to your pocketbook.
Yeah.
Your bank account does
Good.
not predicate your ability to heal.
Yeah, good. I love that. I love that. That's a great point. That's such a great point. So tell people how they can reach you. Let's say somebody wanted to work with you. They wanted to do the DISC assessment. They wanted to like start there. Like, what should they do?
The first thing is go to mykeystome.com. That's mykeystome.com. And you'll see more information based on what the assessment is. You can start off with a 15-minute free consultation. I'll run through the entire process, what the assessment is, the report, answer any questions you might have, and then we can go ahead and get you started. And then contact me everywhere, all social media platforms. It's all at J Morris CEO.
All right, Jermaine, thank you so much. And we will see you guys next month.